Hello and welcome to Lisa Ann Can. I'm Lisa Ann. Thank you for joining me today. I am taking part in a collaboration hosted by Tanisha Kemp, and I will link to her channel in the description box below, and you will be able to see her playlist. I'll also link it to the other ladies that have participated in this collab. The title of it is Best and Worst Homeschooling Advice. So thank you, Tanisha, for doing this. I think this is an excellent topic. And I'm sure as many ladies as you have on your playlist, there's going to be a variety of opinions. People come from all walks of life, and homeschooling, the neat thing about it is you can personalize it and make it your own. You don't have to copy anybody else, and you learn as you go yourself when you're homeschooling. I am a homeschooler of 21 years. I have 6 children. My oldest 4 have all graduated high school, and some have gone on to college. So I call it a success. People have different ideas of what success is. So I think to define what success is the first thing that you have to do when you start homeschooling, because people have different goals. My goal with my children has always been for them to be saved. I wanted them to grow up, learn to read, write, and do basic math. I wanted them to be able to pursue the things that they loved. I knew that if they caught hold of something that they really loved, that they would put their energy and effort into it without me having to prod them constantly. And just judging from my own upbringing, I'm a public school graduate. I learned to read, write, and do basic math. And that has carried me into my adult life and made me able to go anywhere I wanted to and learn what I wanted to. As far as all the rote memorization in school, I don't remember it now other than maybe some songs and the multiplication table. So anyway, whatever your goal is, some families, their goal is academic excellence. And academic excellence is not a bad goal unless your children are not suited to it. So you have to make sure that those goals are realistic. So this brings me right into the best and worst homeschool advice. Just personally, when you meet people whose goal it is to have academic excellence, just make sure you don't idolize that. If your goal is for your children to be saved, grow up and be well-rounded children who love the Lord and can obey God's will. The will of God is for all men to be saved and to come to the knowledge of the truth. So if I have like the smartest children in the world, they're engineers, doctors, lawyers, and very successful monetarily, yet they fail to do just the basic will of God that is plainly stated in the scripture, then they have not been successful at all. So early on, in my homeschooling career, I started homeschooling in the year 2000. My little boy was between 4 and 5 years old, and he was ready to learn, so I was ready to start teaching him. So I read this article that Michael Pearl wrote. Some of you may know him, and some of you may hate him, and that's fine. He's not my favorite person in the whole wide world, but he has given lots of good advice. And I'll take advice from anyone if the advice is sound. He wrote an article called The Reformed School of Alexandria, and it is an excellent article, and I will link that below. I'm going to chalk that up as the best homeschool advice that I ever received. So I hope that you'll take the time to read that, especially those of you who are new to homeschooling. But before I get into that, later on, not too far hence from that, I was exposed to the classical Christian education and very systemized learning and lots of memorization for little children. And I got caught up in that very briefly. I thank the Lord that it passed away quickly with me because it was a program that their goal was academic excellence. And though they say that they're Christian, that really was not the focus of the ministry. And I saw that, thankfully, pretty quickly and decided not to be this taskmaster over my children and having them learn Latin declensions and, all these things. So I think the worst homeschooling advice, nobody ever advised me, hey, use the system. I'm advising you against it. I'm telling you it's bad advice. I have known people who've had children. They are Christian. They did very well with the classical Christian education. And, it remains to be seen actually how successful they are considered, from a biblical standpoint. But it is not for everyone. And it certainly was not for us. It did not meet our goals as a homeschooling family. So I just want to read to you a little bit of some of the negative things about it. And this is my opinion. Look, if you're a lover of classical Christian homeschool and it's working for your family and your children enjoy it, they don't hate it. And, they don't hate you for trying to make you learn all this stuff that's only going to help them pass tests, truly. One of the things that is very intensive is very time-consuming mental discipline for very young children. You take 5 to 12-year-olds and you're having them sort of have this competitive attitude for academic excellence that's so unnatural in children that age. You're filling their brains with facts to pass a test. Or to impress your other classical homeschooling friends. A lot of times we get caught up in the peer pressure too when it comes to, our children are so impressive. That's pride and that's sin, and it will take you nowhere as far as from an eternal perspective. Okay, the focus is on books, and you become book ignorant because you learn all these facts, and yet if you're not balancing it with a life of hands-on learning, it's overbalanced. Okay, and one thing is really, the program is geared for young children whose minds are like sponges and can memorize things, and that is true. Fill them up with Bible verses if you want to have your children memorize something that's actually going to last them into eternity. They're going to die, and then God has a plan for after death too, where He's going to use us. Let us be preparing our children for eternity and not just for the things that are temporary. So anyway, back to the best homeschool advice in this article, the Reformed School of Alexandria. He does not mention classical education in by name in this article. But it seems obvious to me that that is what he's talking about. But he promoted, natural learning for children, real life situations, tools in the hands, actual money, entrepreneurial type jobs, a lemonade stand, or whatever they come up with, real life learning where they're interacting with society and their learning is not limited to books. I am all for that. And I also know from my own personal experience, I had children. I had a boy that learned to read when he was 3 years old with hardly any help from me. I would be doing reading lessons with the older children. He'd say, I want to do a reading lesson. So we did it. And he said, I want to do another one and another one. And then I had a daughter who did not learn to read until she was about 11 years old. And children are different. Not everybody fits in the same mold. And when you do these forced programs, like with classical education, you have the grammar stage, the dialectic stage, and the rhetoric, and their development should be this and this. It's like public school. It's like the Reformed School of Alexandria, Egypt. And by the way, the classical Greek men and women were ignorant of God. They were. They were very knowledgeable in the things of science and literature and all this, but it was worthless to them because they probably perished and are in hell because they didn't know what really mattered. So that should be, as a Christian homeschooling person, make sure your goals line up with the Bible and what God's goals are. So one of the things he mentions in the article is how to balance work and study for children at different ages. So he says a 6 to 10-year-old should have 1 hour of study, 5 hours of recess, and 2 hours of work. Now, that's going to vary depending on the child again, but I do tend to agree with this, and this is the approach that I use with my children. Between the ages of 10 and 14, he says 7 hours of work, 1 hour of study, and then find your own time to play. And kids that age do. They'll work harder and they'll study harder so that they can spend more time spending their recess the way that they would like to. And then by the time they're 15 and older, you're going to have a very mature young person on your hands, okay? And he also mentions in the article that farmers have the lowest divorce rate and the lowest suicide rate. And he's like, I'm not knocking education, and I'm not knocking education. I have a bachelor's degree. My husband is a polymer chemist. Our oldest son is going into computer engineering. But that's not been our goal, and it should not be any Christian's goal. Your goal should be what God's goal is. Okay, so find out what God's goal is, mold your homeschooling and your life to look like that, and you will have a lot more happiness than dollars can bring you from having lawyers and doctors in your house. Now look, hey, you might have a child that naturally has the gifts and the talents and the want to. Let them pursue it. I'm not saying don't go be a doctor or a lawyer. I was going to be a doctor, and I think I would have succeeded at it, except that my heart wanted to marry and have children and be a keeper at home. God's goals was my goal. That's what I really wanted, and I thank him for that. I thank him that he allowed me to do that. So anyway, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to comment below. I know not everyone's going to agree with this, and that's fine. You're a grown person and you make decisions, and your judge is the Lord, nobody else. But I just encourage you to go to the Word of God, understand what God's will is, and if you conform yourself to the image of God, then you're going to be a lot happier. Your children are going to be happier, and they're going to be successful in the way that God defines it. So again, thank you, Tanisha. I will post the playlist below, so please everybody check that out. And by the way, I'm late for this. I really wanted to participate in this collaboration, but it was when I was out of town. So Tanisha was gracious enough to let me tag along late. So thank you, Tanisha, and thank you for watching, and I hope you'll check out some of my other videos.